Thinking of selling your home in Calgary? With prices at all-time highs, but so is the uncertainty. With falling sales, rising inventory, all this tariff talk, and an uncertain economy, it is tempting to want to cash out and sell right now. But here's the thing, one of the biggest regrets I see in real estate comes from homeowners who sold too soon due to fear and panic, just like we have right now in our economy. So in this video, I'll break down some of the reasons why I think you might want to hold on to the property and not sell, and I think this will save you a lot of money and years of regret. Let's get into it. All right, so let's get into it. And point number one, let's talk about the Calgary real estate market. And things have changed quite a bit in Calgary during the past year. Sales are down close to 20%. Inventory has pretty much doubled in Calgary. And many sectors are turning into a balanced market and even some into a buyer's market. So things have changed. Now, what this means for sellers in this market is that they might leave money on the table. To sell in this market, they have to price aggressively. Maybe they have to reduce their price over time to compete against their neighbors. Maybe the buyer wants concessions in the purchase contract for repairs and things like that. So it might cost them more money to sell in this market compared to how it was the last few years. Now, in terms of the real estate market, there's always blips here and there. The market goes through cycles. We've got good markets, bad markets, flat markets. But in the long run, I think you're almost always better off to hold real estate in Canada. It's a very desirable country to move to. We're always attracting newcomers, and Calgary even more so. It's a very hot city, lots of relocation into the city. And if you hold real estate in Calgary, I think you're going to be better off in the long run. But the main point here is that the market goes through cycles, and I wouldn't be selling out of fear. I think you're better off to hold on to real estate for the most part for the long run. And two more points on this topic. I would say that the Calgary real estate market is very local. Some parts of the city are doing quite well, others not so much. For example, the condo market in Northeast Calgary is quite bad at the moment, but on the west side of Calgary, it's actually pretty good. And single-family homes are still performing quite well, but other sectors like condos and townhouses, not so much. And it depends on the actual neighborhood and the product type. So our market here in Calgary is definitely very local. And there are still legitimate reasons to be selling. Maybe there's a birth or a death or a job loss or a relocation. There's all sorts of valid reasons to be selling right now. So if you are out there watching this and you're kind of confused about the market or your particular area, so feel free to reach out. I've got all sorts of resources in the pinned comment or the written description. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you about your buying or selling plans. And point number two, let's talk about trying to time the market. Now, this is almost always a mistake. This is very difficult to do. In theory, it sounds great. Maybe I'll sell high, I'll rent for a bit, and I'll wait for the market to crash, and then I'll jump into the market and buy at the low. In theory, it sounds awesome, but it's so difficult to actually do. In the stock market, you hear the expression trying to catch a falling knife. So it's quite difficult. I think most people who are trying to do this in Calgary will probably end up spending more money. Maybe they're stuck in an expensive rental market and they just miss the boat altogether. Maybe the prices shoot up again. So it's so difficult to actually time the market. And I would say in the long run, you're almost always better to hold real estate, like I mentioned in point one. So unless you've got some expert knowledge on this topic, I would probably avoid trying to time the market. I think most people will get it wrong. And a prime example of this would be COVID. Nobody was predicting that when COVID first hit, that the prices in Calgary would rebound and they'd essentially double in value and the inventory would just decrease to almost nothing. Nobody was predicting that. I would say most people in real estate were actually a bit terrified of the market and they were legit worried, and the complete opposite happened. So I think trying to time the market or predict the market is very difficult. So the main idea here is that I wouldn't be panicking. The market goes through little blips here and there. I wouldn't be trying to time the market. I think most people will make a mistake doing that, and you're almost always better off just to hold real estate for the long term. And the next point, selling a home in Calgary is expensive. So most sellers don't realize how expensive it actually is to sell a property in Calgary. So I'll give you just a good example here. So the average price in Calgary of a single-family detached home these days is around $750,000. Now, the typical commission that you see in Calgary, commission is negotiable, but a typical rate is 7% of the first $100,000 and 3% of the balance. That works out to just over $25,000. So it's expensive. Now, when you factor in lawyer fees, might be around $2,000. Maybe in this market, the buyer wants some repairs done to the property. Moving expenses can be quite expensive as well. Maybe that's another $2,000 to $3,000 just to move to the next property. And maybe the next property also requires some updates and repairs. So it does get quite expensive. And maybe you're selling an investment property and there's capital gains to look into and consider. So there's lots of expenses that many homeowners don't realize at first. It just can be quite expensive. And maybe you're better off to take that money and put it back into your property. Maybe do some landscaping or put in a new kitchen, new baths, or just update it. Might be the better option for a lot of people versus buying a new property. Again, there are lots of valid reasons to be selling right now, but if your main motivation is timing the market or you're bored of the property, I would probably just hold off and maybe put that money back into your own property. You might be better off in the long run to do that. And the next point, this is kind of like an investor way of looking at things. Don't sell because times get tough. You might want to hold on to the property and turn it into an investment. So what I'm getting at here, it's a bit of a different way of looking at things, is if you want to make a move, odds are you've got lots of equity in your property because the price has really shot up in Calgary the past few years, and maybe you still have a low interest rate as well and a low monthly payment. You might want to take out an equity line of credit on the property and buy a new home and then rent out your current property. You'd be surprised at how expensive rent is in Calgary right now. And this might be a way to get into a new property and turn your old one into an investment. And this is a good way to build kind of generational wealth by becoming a real estate investor. Now, this is not for everybody, but it's just kind of a different way of looking at things that might be of interest. And the next point, I would say for most people, the current home that they're in is almost always the best option. And I'll use my mom and my stepdad as an example here. They're always buying and selling. They're like my biggest clients. And sometimes it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but they're always buying and selling. And I think a lot of the public are like this. Maybe they're upsizing because the home is too small. They get to the new property and it's too big. The utilities are too expensive. It's hard to do the upkeep. The taxes are more expensive. So they end up selling and they buy something else. And maybe the next property is too small now. There's not enough storage, not enough space in the property, and they end up selling again. So I would say for most people, they're probably better off to stay where they're at and maybe renovate the property versus buying something that's either too big or too small and just wasting a lot of your time. And the last point, let's talk about regret. Now, if you talk to a lot of elderly people in Calgary, it's quite common to hear them say, I regret selling the property. If I could just find a way to hold on to it for a bit longer, their life would be quite a bit different. Now, if you look at places like Vancouver, people were buying homes there for like $150,000 like in the 80s. It's insane. Those properties nowadays are worth like $2 to $3 million. So that's a lot of regret. So that's an extreme example in Vancouver. But here in Calgary, if you look at Northeast Calgary in areas like Marlborough, Rundle, just a couple of years ago before COVID, you could buy homes there for like $300,000. Now I'm seeing homes in those areas for like $600,000. It's crazy to me how expensive they've gotten. So I think the main message here is that you want to look at the bigger picture in real estate. Don't worry about the minor blips here and there. Think long-term, 10, 20 years. And most people, especially when buying single-family homes, you really can't go wrong by just holding it and weathering any storm and just kind of think bigger picture. Now, with that said, there are still lots of valid reasons to be selling your property. It could be births, deaths, job relocation, job loss, all sorts of reasons. And if you are out there watching this and you do want to sell your property, feel free to reach out. I would love to help you out. I've got some free resources for you in the pinned comment: buyer's guide, seller's guide, relocation guide. You can give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. If you'd like a home evaluation, feel free to reach out, free of charge. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next video.